All right, salam alaikum to some of you and peace out to the rest of you. You know who it is, what to press, and why. That being said, I'm going to give a few minutes before I really get started because I'm going to give y'all time to get in. And of course, when you see this, hit the share button. If um, if the sound goes out suddenly, please hit a 2, put that in the chat, and then I'll know to fix the sound. If you're able to hear it clearly, hit the 1 for me. All right. Well, I assume nobody can hear. I guess I'm going to have to fix the sound and hold on. I'm going to have to adjust the microphone. If you do hear me though, and you're in the chat, hit a 1, and then I'll know then that it's working. All right. I'm giving you all time to come in. I'm not so sure how the sound is, but I'm going to let you all know now. My keyboard on this is kind of loud. It doesn't drown out the sound of me. It won't stop you from hearing me, but the keyboard is generally loud. So sometimes I'm going to be typing in the chat or maybe clicking on something. Forgive me, but it's not going to drown out the sound. Okay. All right. We got one. Let me know that he can hear. All right. So if you can hear, do like Dr. Giro 64 and put a 1 in. What I'm typing in is for those who cannot hear. Okay. Also, folks, please hit that share button. Let people you know about this. I'm going to send a link to somebody right now. To somebody specific, I'm going to send a link to let them know that I'm live. So when you hear me typing, again, don't take offense. The keyboard's just loud like that. That's the way this computer's set up. If I use my newer laptop with Windows 10 on it, the keyboard is silent, but everything is just entirely too slow, and that's unforgivable, especially when doing a live stream. Let me ask y'all this though, right quick, while I'm waiting. Can some of you, how you doing, Dr. Giro? Can you all tell me what time it is where you all are now? I'm not going to ask what city or state. I'm just going to ask if y'all can tell me what time it is, because it's almost 6 a.m. where I am, and I realize that it's a different time for a lot of you, but I don't know what time zone everyone's in. For some of you, it may be late. You got to work tomorrow, or you don't. Because tomorrow's Saturday for y'all. Okay. Okay. All right. Got it. Cool. Okay then. Yeah, it's 5:51 a.m. where I am. So yeah, for some of you guys, you may not. Hopefully, y'all don't have to work tomorrow, but some of you, I know you're going to have to. And okay. All right. Somebody's off. And then for some of y'all, like if you're in California, then it's not going to be all that. For some of you, if you're in California, it'll be maybe it's close to 8 p.m. So it's not too late for most of you. All right. So that being said, now that I sent the link out that I need to send, I'm going to go ahead and get started. And if any Muslims in the audience, one of them I know is in Salam Alaikum, Ramadan Mubarak, and Eid Mubarak. We just found out that it's going to be on Sunday, which is tomorrow for us. I think it's still the day after tomorrow for most of you. But yeah, it's going to be Sunday for us, where we are. And I mean, it's going to be tomorrow for us. And this one went by real quick. A lot of people have been passing away during Ramadan. And usually they're really good character, really pious people that are passing away like this. So um, I'm not going to assume that I'm going to be here for the next one, especially with COVID-19 circulating around. And in my age, it's very possible um, to have an underlying condition. I don't have to be irresponsible for that to happen, for that to be the case. All right, so here's the deal. Um, when Ahmaud Arbery got popped by those race soldiers in Georgia, um, I heard exactly what I expected to hear. I heard a lot of sisters, if you will, a lot of sapphires, boom shikas, and bonquishas saying that they weren't going to cape this time, that they were grieving, but they weren't going to cape. They weren't going to march. They weren't going to get in on this because they don't think he would have done the same. And most of us that were marching for him or spreading the awareness of his case would not have done the same if he had been a black woman. I heard this and I read this. To make matters worse, Breonna Taylor then wound up getting shot in Louisville, Kentucky. Breonna Taylor, in her case, it turns out that her name was on the warrant. It was probably based on some bad information, but her name was on the warrant. I think that the way they went into her place was also wrong, although they were going in off of wrong information. And it was wrong for them to arrest Kenneth Walker. They knew doggone well they were using a no-knock warrant. I know, right? Tell me about it, Mujahid. Unfortunately, greetings, Mr. Clutch. Yeah, unfortunately, I did hear this. Oh, we're not going to march. We're not doing any of that because nobody marches when it's a black woman. Nobody cares. That was the kind of stuff I heard. And naturally, I was getting sick and tired of hearing that because most of us men in the US and Canada and really most of the first world aren't really into this red pill stuff. They don't know. They're not aware of this. So most of them were upset about Breonna Taylor if they heard about her case. But see, everybody didn't hear about it. The truth is, her case happened after Ahmaud Arbery had already been shot. And Kenneth Walker, I understand that as of a few hours ago, he got released. They dropped the charges. He was let go, and he should have been because he not only had a legal weapon, which he only fired in self-defense by his knowledge, but he had a concealed carry permit as well. So because of that, we can't sit up here and say, oh, look, man, we can't say that he was just, we can't say he was doing anything wrong. We can't say he was trespassing. We can't say that he may have stolen a hammer. And these things weren't even true under Georgia law regarding Ahmaud Arbery, under Georgia law. So the police screwed that up. And I'm not here to argue for or against no-knock warrants. I'm really not. I'm going to leave that to local police departments, although the truth be told, you're not going to hear me ever say that white folks have any business enforcing any laws in our areas. You're not even going to hear me say that white society has any rights that we're bound to respect, because we know the Supreme Court passed that ruling in the reverse with the Dred Scott decision, and they've been acting like it ever since then. And so it's taken international embarrassment to get just a little bit of civil rights that we've gotten since the 1960s. And now that's not working because what they're doing is they're trying to internationally embarrass us. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, but that's what they're trying to do. I know that because I taught several students, but last semester I taught one student that was fluent in English. He had lived actually in California during a lot of his childhood. So here he is, a Gulf Arab whose dad was high up in the government and was getting training in California through a lot of his childhood. And so he lived there, grew up there. Fluent in English, fluent in Arabic, the local dialect. He could even understand classical Arabic. And this guy even one day said to me, no disrespect, Dr. Black, but a lot of the black men are criminals, and that's why people are afraid. And of course, I let him have it. And I said to him, well, no disrespect, Mr. Arab, but a lot of Arab men are terrorists, and that's why people are afraid. Now, do you see how stupid that sounds? Well, that's how dumb you sounded when you said what you said. The police and the media are going to zero in on one Arab if they find a terrorist. They're going to zero in on that terrorist in order to make sure that every time an Arab face is on the news, it's associated with terrorism. It's the same thing when you're black. And he said, yeah, but what about the black on black crime? And I asked him, well, when an Arab does become a terrorist, who are the majority of casualties? Aren't the majority of the casualties other Arabs? If any Muslim, Arab or not, because most Muslims aren't Arabs, become a terrorist, who are the majority of the casualties? Then it becomes other Muslims, usually of whatever ethnicity the so-called attacker is. And that's assuming that these are not staged events. So when white people commit crimes, they usually commit crimes against other white folks, and they're actually likely to commit crimes against their own family members. When black folks commit crimes, it's a case of proximity. And so in reality, most people tend to commit crimes against their own ethnicity. And if somebody gets saved from a crime, it's usually by someone of their own ethnicity. So that's not going to fly. And he tried to interrupt me, which is a very white thing to do. And it's also a very Arab thing to do. And I'm not going to act like it ain't a very black thing to do either. Everybody interrupts because everybody knows everything, right? So because of that, I'll just go ahead and say it. I had to not raise my voice, but light in on this guy. But we're talking about double standards and why you might need them. Most black women are going to tell you that the double standards are always skewed to their disfavor every time. And what they're doing is they're taking what is skewed to their disfavor between them and other women, mostly between them and Miss Ann. And they're projecting this onto every other situation and assuming the same thing. And they're saying that it's always skewed in their disfavor, even when they're compared to women from third world nations, which may not necessarily be the case. But let's take what we learn about them from the very beginning. Go back to middle school right quick. You become interested. They seem to be interested, at least in guys. You learn that they're very picky. You learn that they're interested in so few of the guys. So when you learn that they are like married. You learn that they like so few of the guys, but they do generally like guys. But you don't realize that they're actually as interested in guys as you are in the girls. Their interest, they do a very good job of minimizing in front of any males. That is, of course, until you find out about some that go to an all-girls school. And you see how it is. It's the same thing here. Males and females are educated separately here. There was one time when during a summer class, the classes for both genders were in the same location, but they were at different times. So I had to go in one time early to set up, but the ladies were running late. And I had to go and let one of the administrators know, look, I got to set up in this class and they're still in it. So both of us had to go in so that each one could be a witness for the other, that we did not harass anybody, but that we were telling them your time is up. And now the male teachers have to come and set up early before the male students arrive. You're killing our time. You're eating into our time. When we were on the way, the administrator asked me if I was nervous. And I said, well, no, not with you here. Why would I be nervous? And he said, well, the girls may be really, really happy to see you. You see, so the thing is that what he was saying is if he didn't go with me, they probably would try to flirt, try to get numbers and everything else because they get thirsty. But they get thirsty because they don't have access. But you think, go back to middle school. You think about the access that they do have. And so consequently, they seem to be, you learn that they're interested, but you don't learn that they're thirsty as guys get. So all the double standards are based on that. The double standard that if you or getting a bunch of numbers at that age, let alone if you actually get them drawers, you a player, you a Mac. I know I'm using old school terminology because I came up in the 80s and 90s. But if she has a bunch of dudes' numbers, or if a bunch of dudes have her number, and if she even so much as gets busy with two of them, she's easy and she's a slut. Well, I'm not going to say that that's a fair double standard in many cases. The problem is that it's based on a perception that they uphold. And that perception is that they're not really that concerned. They're not as concerned as we are with that particular act. That's where we got the double standard. It came from that. So I've already pointed out before how it is that they can talk about these double standards, but they themselves will uphold these same double standards. And they'll uphold them even more than guys will, because if you notice now, and I'm asking you guys to do this for me right quick. 7 of you looking right now. 6 of you, sorry. This is what I'm asking y'all to do for me. Type in a 1 if you realistically expect every woman you sleep with to be a virgin before you sleep with her. If you don't have to type in anything. But if you realistically expect her to be a virgin the first time you lay down with her, put a 1 in the chat. Go ahead. Ten seconds have passed by. No 1s yet. 15. 20. All right. You don't even expect it. It's not expected anymore. So who's more flexible at this point? Which gender's been more flexible? And some of you would say, well, yeah, but I mean, women don't sit up here saying that you got to be a virgin for them to give you some. No, you're right. It's the opposite, actually. We know that. We know that what they want is, we know that what they're looking for is for guys to be extra experienced. I already mentioned the theoretical setup that I gave, the survey that I gave to a bunch of different ladies, about 12 of them when I was working years ago back in Atlanta. And the theoretical situation was, simply put, 3 guys, similar in income, looks, and everything else, because they're siblings. These 3 guys are the same except for one thing. One is an ex-player, the other one is a womanizer, the other one is a virgin. Which one do you want? And I told you how 11 out of the 12 said they wanted the ex-player. One said you wanted the virgin, and then she declined when I said that I would introduce her to some. So all the remaining 11 said that they wanted the ex-player. And they even said it, well, he's got the experience, but he's not a player anymore. They didn't want the player. But the fact is, the player is already being selected. Otherwise, he wouldn't be a player, the one that's still a womanizer. So their own standards demand that you have to abide by the double standard in order to become what it is that you want. Phantom clutch facts. They got all the advantages in the dating field. And that means they got all the advantages in the marriage field. Because while they'll sit up and say that they're the gatekeepers to get busy and you're the gatekeepers to commitment and marriage, the real truth is they're the gatekeepers to the draws because we let them be the gatekeepers to sex. We gave them that possibility by making our sex too easy. We didn't demand anything in exchange for it. So we let them be the gatekeepers. And they still are the gatekeepers along with us to commitment and to marriage. Because if either one of us says, no, we're not doing that, then the wedding is off naturally. It's the same thing with getting busy. If either one says we're not doing this, then, the ding-a-ling appointment is off. The booty call is off. The problem is that we're not necessarily trained to say, no, we're not doing that. And since they're not hearing no, the double standards are based on that. Gentlemen, I've already said in previous videos, You think that this is a romantic game that you can win. It is not a romantic game. It is a war. It is a reproductive war. Most of them in the West have the same goal. In the East, I'm sure it goes back and forth, good and bad. But most of them in the West have the same goal. And that goal is to get pregnant by a few, a very, very, very limited few. Usually, according to dating site studies, it's about 13% of guys that they actually want. And they don't necessarily want to have all of their babies, but their goal is to have their babies and then bring the babies to the rest of us. And so when we become red pill, we understand that a lot of what we've seen, a lot of what we've gone through, or what we've seen other friends of ours go through, is not because of what these friends did wrong with women, but rather because of what they did not know about women in the West. When we realize this and we report this, the same thing, we hear the same thing from the matriarchs as we hear from their mandingos. Oh, it's not them, it's you. You hear this from a lot of these PUAs and these dating coaches. Oh, it's not them and what they want, even though they lied about it, which means they're hiding something. Oh no, it's you. So you're supposed to feel like you're doing something wrong because you're not psychic and you can't read her mind. They'll sit up and say that you're hard to figure out, but when it comes to being with them, that's where we're easy. So the only part about us that is important to them, which is how we are towards them, is very easy, very simple. We're not that complicated. They are. And yet they want to sit up and say that we're difficult to figure out, when in fact, they're not only difficult to figure out, they're impossible to figure out. How do we know? Because when you start to learn more about them, then they try to change, or they don't change, which is even worse. Either way it goes, they never level out. And their complaints are based on what it is that they want in the first place. They don't learn what's not available. If you say that you want a stripper to become your housewife and settle down with just you and become exclusive to you, you know you're going to get laughed out the room. Men are going to laugh at you more than the women will. Oh, the women will lie to you. Oh, that's so sweet. No, the guys are going to be the ones that'll laugh at you because you know that's unrealistic. When they sit up and talk about what it is that they want, that's not the same thing. When they start talking about what they want, we don't laugh them out the room like we should. It's only been recently. Without social media, we would not be doing this. Failing to understand that this has been a war pretty much ever since there's been a West, pretty much ever since there's been women's lib, so to speak, or ever since there's been at least the second wave of feminism. Facts again, Phantom. You cannot out alpha the gynocracy. Not when the law is in their favor and against yours. It's very true. So you got these guys talking about how alpha they are. And there are two outcomes possible with that. And they're going to have to go through one of the two. One outcome is they're alpha, but they got to kick out child support. I do. I don't mind that they actually are my kids. They're my responsibility. But these guys act as though they'll try to act like the other situation is the only one that happens, when in fact both happen, and neither one is really worth a Chinese nickel at this point. The first situation that they're going to act like is that they're the ones that breed and you are the one that has to feed. In other words, they got these babies and you're the sucker raising them, and they'll brag about that because in actuality they know they've got to pay. The other situation is, of course, the one that they just said. Sometimes that does happen. They do the breeding, someone else does the feeding. And that is actually the goal of the majority of the Western women. Now, they may be aware of it, they may not. But what they're doing is they're sitting up and looking and they're saying, okay, only a few alphas, most of them are betas. What they really mean is only a few are attractive to us. The rest of them are unattractive. But the other ones that are unattractive are good for everything except for getting busy, bumping uglies. And so, of course, you understand how insulting this is to you. I mean, that's why we cringe when we look at Russell Wilson's situation and what he was willing to accept from Sierra. And they're both millionaires. But we look at that situation and say, but he didn't have to. Why did he? Because it was an insult to him. Even if he was the one that requested to be introduced to her, still. Oh no, Phantom Clutch. Actually, they don't just want to get with the Playboy billionaire Bruce Wayne. That's not all. You see, they want to overlook Clark Kent, not just for Bruce Wayne. They then want to upgrade from Bruce Wayne to Superman, which is not even human and not even realistic. See, these basic Lois Lanes, Phantom Clutch, still demand Superman, but they're not willing to be Wonder Woman. That's what we're dealing with here. They want to all have Superman's baby, but then they want to go back to someone like, if they can get Bruce Wayne to raise Superman's baby, that's fine, but they know they can't. So then they want to go to Clark Kent to raise Superman's baby. Now, we understand that in the actual storyline, Clark Kent and Superman were the same one. But what I'm saying is that in their minds, these are two different guys. And what they want to do is they actually want to either guilt you or trick you into raising the child of a man that they already deemed to be superior, which means that they've deemed you to be inferior, not worth anything better. And that's why it's so bad. That's why I said this is war. And the fact that it's war is the reason why it is that we need to go ahead and start with some of these double standards. We need to bring back some of the old ones, and we need to introduce some new double standards. I'm going to tell you guys straight up. What you got to do is you got to learn to control your stomach, because if you control your stomach, everything below that is going to fall in line. You make a decision, it will obey. You tell your stomach when you're going to eat. I'm talking about fasting. You do that, believe you me, everything else below the belt, it obeys you. That's what I meant when I said use your thirst to control your thirst, or rather use your hunger to control your thirst. In other words, fast and use your appetite for food and water in order to control the other appetite. When we start doing this, that's going to turn the tide in this war. And that's when they can no longer come along and tell us that we owe it to the community, or we owe it to any moral understanding to sit up here and only accept the role of stepdad. Now, when you are a dad already and they bring their babies, okay, you can determine if you're equally yoked or not. But we're looking at scenarios in which we're looking at a lot of scenarios in which they're all on code. They're all together about one thing, and that is they're going to take a normal guy and determine that he's actually mediocre, subpar. And they're going to put him on the back burner. And then when he's in his late 30s, then they'll come along with someone else's kids and tell him now he's got a shot at a regular family life and a healthy sex life. A shot. And that's not even going to be true, because we know what it is that they're going to do if he takes that deal. He takes the deal, he raises the kids, she still cheats with somebody that's more similar to the father, the biological father of the babies. We understand that. That's not a game. That's war, gentlemen. That's downright insulting. So that being said, that's the justification right there. See, listen to what the dating coaches are telling you and the PUAs are telling you. Hell, you can listen to what one particular content creator is telling you. Facts can't even be the black canary. But listen, you can listen to one particular content creator always says, and this is a content creator that will tell you what their nature is, and then he will say that you need to man up and deal with it. Particular one, he's really good for that. He'll tell you what their nature is and how duplicitous and how mean and how warlike it is, and then he'll tell you that you're creepy and you're rapey because you don't succeed with this. You don't succeed with this cultural group, this cultural demographic, cultural block of women that see you as being no good for anything except for pretty much everything except for sex. Like they look at you and they make the assumption that you must be whack in the bed because you're not that part of that 13% that all of her friends want as well, which means that she's not even judging you through her own eyes. She's judging you through other women's eyes, her peers' eyes. It's like this, gentlemen. When it comes to the Western community as a whole, I know the white women are doing this to white men, but I'm not here to address that. I'm just saying it ain't nobody, necessarily better than us. I don't want us to get this idea for 1 second. But talking about black folks, I'm gonna say this: we black men are the only ones that are judged by our own natural counterpart through the eyes of the oppressor. In other words, sisters are judging you and me through the eyes of white men and their most negative stereotypes of us. So they're using the most negative stereotypes of us to determine if we're a man or not. You got to be intimidated. Other people got to be afraid of you. Other people got to not trust you. If you're that black man that the elevator door opens up for and a white woman does not clutch her purse, if you're that dude, that's that non-threatening black man as far as other folks are concerned, she doesn't want you. She's looking for the negative stereotype. Quiet as it's kept, white women do too. If you're that black man that can go out to a restaurant and eat with them and the waiter is not intimidated by you and shaking, even the white woman's going to look at you like, maybe I'm going to go get another guy. But the sister definitely is going to do that, even if she's educated, even if she didn't grow up in that kind of environment, even if her dad was in her life and spent a lot of time with her and he was earning a lot of money. It's still, she's looking at you through the eyes of the negative stereotypes that a white dude would have of you. The problem is that they've got us judging each other the same way. And that's why it is that you got some of these content creators that are sitting up here and they're saying, well, yeah, they're this way and they're that way, but that's their nature and they can't help it. And you just need to deal with that. And by the way, you should pay me so I can talk down to you and tell you how to be a bigger, better alpha. Like I am. That's what they're doing. These are guys that have already lost the war because they didn't know that there was a war in the first place. They think that by telling you how to win a few battles here and there, that they're teaching you something. No, they done already lost the war. What you have to understand, gentlemen, is this. No matter how bad you have done with a Western woman, white or black, especially black, no matter how badly you may have done in the past, and even if it was due to dumb things you were doing as a young guy, because all young guys don't know what they're doing, they're starting off, you were not to let them or any gynocrat goons or matriarchal mandingos come to you and tell you that it's probably not the fact that you're a thinking black man, but it's probably just you're just bad at women. They're going to come and tell you this. They've already done it. Some of me, one of them was trying to tell me this earlier today. He tried to suggest the possibility of it. He admitted we don't know each other in person. This is YouTube. But he, while admitting that, said you should consider the possibility that you're just bad at women. He tried to say the same thing to Select the Job. Now, he and I don't hate each other. I mean, me and the guy that was trying to suggest this. But I had to nicely remind him that I already know what the deal was, because when you're young, everybody screws up. Nobody's born with game. The problem is that when you start to, which is you get older and you learn what to do, what not to do, what not to wear. You learn all these dumb hoops that you shouldn't have to jump through anyway, and you learn to jump through them. Now what's left? If you're still doing bad with them, well, you got to start looking at what it is with them. It's rather their inability to properly assess the opposite gender. And I'm going to call it what it is. I'm going to say it like it is. The Western woman does not have that ability. The white woman is looking at the white guy and assuming that he's a wimp. I don't know. I mean, a lot of white guys tend to think that way about themselves, so I'm not here to argue with them or save them anyway. But the truth be told, just like whites have become the most aggressive throughout the planet, in large part due to the materialism of the European white woman back home, which was a major impetus for their colonization of other areas. This similar thing has happened, except that we're not allowed to colonize. So we've been directed to be aggressive towards each other, trying to impress her Bristol Philip behind. That's why Lionel McTow calls them the Klingon B words. He's not saying that black women are ugly, they look like Klingon women. He's clarified this before. He's talking about their penchant for violence, because in the Star Trek series, the Klingons were very warlike. And that's what he's saying, that these women act like war and violence is the way that you determine a man's manhood. Well, you got to be a man to fight a war. That's true. or to fight it successfully. But that doesn't mean that they get to sit back, not fight any wars at all, not help you in a war, and to determine it because you didn't win every single battle of every single war you were in, that you're not a man. So when people come to you and they try to tell you, no, it's not them, it's actually you, you can consider that in the back of your mind. But chances are, if you're anywhere close to my age, if you're 10 years younger than I am, if you're 30 years old, even just 30, and that's more than 10 years younger than me, then you already had to consider this. What am I doing? What do I need to do differently? And you made some changes and you tried different things. And if nothing has worked for you, then it is because you have not learned how to psychologically manipulate a defective cultural block of women. That's not your fault. So how dare they have double standards that are not to your favor? And how dare they complain if you come up with some standards that are in your favor and not in theirs? Because like I said, this is not it's not a cooperation. It's not even a competition. It's an all-out war. We just didn't know it. What they want, what's in their best interest, they can only get if you don't know that that's what they were shooting for the whole time. And what that is like I said, for you to put your resources into the mouth of a child of another man. That's it. That's what their war is about. It's actually, the funny thing is that let's say that she can't do that. Let's say that she can't even have babies no more. Okay. If she can't have them anymore, but you say, let's say you still want to get with her, whether it's just a smash or in the context of a commitment or even in the context of a marriage. What is the one thing that you have to go through in order to get them draws? Stress. You think about it. If she can't gain anything, she will still put you through some kind of headache or stress. All that means is that she was programmed to make sure that it's difficult for you. That's it. Even if she doesn't gain anything anymore, she still has to make sure you lose something simply because you had a satisfying heterosexual encounter with her. Even in the context of a marriage in many cases. That's the one thing that they are agreeing to do, is to make that difficult for you. Sometimes even when you are their type. Because they make exceptions, but they only make exceptions when they see that this guy is also their friend's type. That's more important to them, for them to make an exception, than it is that you be her type. It's more important to her that you are also her friend's type. She might make an exception then because she can brag to her friends about how she got you, how you chose her, even if it was only for a pump and dump. That's war. Nothing other than making sure that you have to go through some kind of stress to get it. That's a war. Even when it doesn't benefit them, that's just a contempt for you at that point. So, you know what? I'm not telling any of you to fornicate. But if you do, you repent. For her, no hymen, no diamond. Now, I understand that the hymen's not always there, but what I'm saying is, yeah, you treat them a certain way based on how they've let other men treat them that you know about. If you don't know, you don't know. But if you know she tolerated mistreatment from men before, you don't have to treat her any better. If you know that she was on time for men before, she can't be late for any appointments with you. If you know that other men were late for appointments with her, you don't have to be on time. Now, if you don't know, again, like I said, you don't know. But if you do know, okay, now you know, all right, then I'm not going to be on time for you. I'm going to be as late as that you told me that last guy was. I mean, you complained to me about him, so now I know he was on half an hour late by default. So, or just on average. So I might show up half an hour late. You better not, because you didn't do that to him. You start doing this. You start saying to them, whatever we find out about that you tolerated, you will tolerate from me too. Just as one example. If you decide you want to take someone out and you know she was smashing someone else on the first date, I'm not telling you to fornicate again. But if she decides to pull that, we're not doing this, then you just bounce. What's the reason? Because she's not respecting you. She's not doing this because of a moral reason. She's doing that because she thinks you're just inferior. So even if you weren't hoping to fornicate, still, just on general principle, you bounce. And that's easy to do. It's easy to have that kind of mindset when you've been fasting and your libido is really, really greatly reduced to the point it doesn't even make a decision for you. And then to the point that it's more like a curiosity than it is an appetite. That's what happens when you fast. So when you get it down to that, then when they start with all this stuff, you're going to know exactly how to react. Okay, so let me get this straight. I know that he smashed, and they took you out. But you're going to tell me that I got to wait 90 days. Well, now you're going to have to wait forever for me. And as a matter of fact, if you do change your mind, you're going to have to pay me for it. You flip it on them. Because you see, they're going to say to you that you don't have the right to choose how to treat them based on how other people treated them. But they are exactly doing just that. That's exactly what it is that they're doing. So, hold on, folks. Give me a second. All right. So, gentlemen, understand that if you're being told that you can't make those decisions based on how someone else treated her, understand that right there is a double standard. Because while they may not come out and tell you, that's exactly what they're doing. Whatever they know that a friend did to you and got away with, or anybody else did to you and got away with, she demands the same thing. If you've been a dummy spending a whole bunch of money taking them out to eat and not getting anything in return, I swear to God, I swear, if she finds that out, she's going to demand the same thing from you. She's just going to try to do it more low key. Sometimes they're not even low key about it. They get hungry enough, they start telling on themselves, wait a minute, so you're not going to take me out. I want to go to this restaurant and you're insisting that we go somewhere else. Yep, exactly. I'm insisting we go somewhere that costs less. But why? You took so-and-so to Red Lobster and I know what she had and she ordered X, Y, and Z and you didn't complain about it. You see, well, now you're smart. She's going to say, well, you don't have the right to get smart at my inconvenience. So what you're doing is you're saying to them, okay, well, you don't have a right to start setting standards at my inconvenience. Last Mujahid, I've heard of that before. I've heard of a hymen repair surgery before. I'm not really sure how you can tell when someone's gotten it, but I have heard of it. But sometimes the hymen's just not there anyway. But the point I'm making is that that was more of a symbol, really. The point I'm making is that we just have to be difficult to the extent that they are, and we have to, especially when it comes to this. I mean, you and I both, we're going to say, well, yeah, that's for marriage anyway, and it should be limited to marriage. But even in order to get married, even for that, we got to start making some standards instead of, even for us Muslims, last Mujahid, instead of it only being about we got to pay the dowry, we got to prove ourselves to her dad or brother or uncle or something like that. Instead of it just being that, we got to start flipping and saying, okay, well, I mean, you can have these standards, but here are mine. And flip it back. Okay, no, so Dad, I got to prove myself to you. Fair enough. Now I got questions about how you've raised her and everything else. I'm under a microscope. So are you. Yeah, I might want to marry her, but you know what? She's under a microscope too, because I need to know how you raised her. So let's go ahead and analyze each other. We need to make this thing mutual, because a lot of times we're not doing it. And that's been our mistake. That's exactly why it is that I have to have this recording. And that's why I got to tell young brothers that sometimes these are older guys that come along and say, well, it may not be them, it's probably you, and you need to look into yourself. And they're not completely wrong, but they're saying the right thing for the wrong reason and in the wrong context. What they're doing is they're saying something that's factually true, but that's factually true for anybody, period. You constantly reassess yourself. And they're saying that as if to say to you, there's nothing about them that's wrong. The vending machine is not broken. You just don't have enough money. When in fact, you've put in, it doesn't matter where you got the money from. You put the money into the vending machine and you can't get the Coke out. And then they want to say it's you're wrong, but the machine is screwed up. Or better yet, I'm gonna liken it to a video game. Sometimes you have these controls for the video games and the controls are just either too slow or they're defective. So you hit the right combination, but the character on the screen does not respond to doesn't respond to your input. Then the character gets shot or gets bitten or something in the game. And imagine that, imagine that instead of the competitor saying to you, yeah, man, I kicked your behind, look at that. I beat your behind in this. I won that. Instead of the competitor doing that, imagine that the control that does not respond is the one that starts talking trash when you lose. That's what it's like here. It's not even the competitor that doesn't understand what the control is doing wrong. It's more like the control itself starts talking back to you. The joystick or the console you use. That's what it's like. And so now you got to flip it back on them. And you have every right now to say, you know what, I'm not committing to you, not marrying you. And then, well, why not? You're just not it. And you don't even have to explain it. Leave them in confusion. Because the guys that they want are doing exactly this. They're doing exactly this. And many men are telling you can't play the game that women play the way women play it. Well, the guys that they want are playing the game exactly that same way. The same ways that they will play regular men, the same way that she's going to play regular guys. There is some dude, a rare dude, but there's some guy that's playing exactly the same way with her. Sometimes these women learn these games from these guys, the guys that they actually pursue. And these are the same ones that will tell you and me they never pursue a man. And there's somebody that they're willing to pursue, and they got to chase after him, and he's playing these games, and they learn these games from them and turn around and want to play them on us. And that's why it is I say, look, treat it like a war. And in war, whatever you do to win is fair, especially if you didn't start the war. And we all know we men did not start this war because we're just not that complex. We just aren't. We've made it, like I said, our flaw is that we've made these things too simple. So by being too simple, we certainly did not start this war because we didn't even think of romance and, sorry, I got to move this table out the way. We didn't even think of romance and in marriage and mating as a war. We didn't think of it like that. We thought of it as difficult, and we excused them for making it this difficult. Oh, that's just how they are. Yeah, I would want my daughter to be that way. Okay, well, now we have a bunch of somebody's daughters running around making commitments with one man, meaning marrying one man, and then cheating with somebody completely different. Demanding that one guy be persistent all the time, always trying to prove his affection while she pursues another guy. And then when she finally agrees to accept the commitment of the committed man, she's still going and cheating with the other guy. And the reason I'm saying this is because a study came out recently, and the content creator Better Bachelor was the one that made a reference to this study. The study showed that Western women are admitting to cheating more than Western men are. And he said that the reason we know they're doing it is because the numbers of Western men that admit to cheating have not changed in decades. But in recent decades, Western women are admitting to cheating more than Western men. So that means if they're not doing it, they're still ashamed of not doing it to the point that they'll brag about doing something that they're not even guilty of doing. Or they're actually doing it. Either it's a confession or it's a false confession. Either way, it's a confession. That's what we know is going on. So that tells you that they have a very warlike attitude about it. Exactly, Phantom. It's not even like that. That's exactly what it is. We're getting blamed for not being able to read women's minds. And one of the reasons that I suggested the solution that I suggested, the religious solution, one reason I suggested that was because that's exactly what it is that's happening. And when you leave the West, they know that you can't read their minds, but they can't blame you for it. That's the other thing. Can't blame you. They can't read their minds. Okay, fine. But they can't blame you for not reading their minds. You come home with the flowers and they're not the kind of flowers she likes. She knows it's not your fault. She didn't say what she liked. You try to come up with a surprise. She has to appreciate the effort. That's usually what happens when you bounce out the West. If she's acting like that, that's an individual thing. It's not a cultural thing. Whereas in the West, it is a phenomenon. You bring home the wrong flowers, you bring home the wrong chocolate, you don't make enough money. This whole thing of leaving Jay Cutler, leaving guys like Jay Cutler for not being ambitious after he's put his body on the line to take care of her. This whole thing of Tom Brady complaining because of the housework he doesn't do, when between the two of them, he and Gisele Bündchen are worth $600 million and don't have to worry about housework. This whole thing of complaining about Boris Kojo because of him not acting like a boyfriend. That's not this kind of complaint is not a phenomena outside of the West, because you see, years ago, most of us saw this on Facebook. Years ago, about maybe 5 years ago or 6 years ago, maybe 6 years ago, Judge Lynn was on a stage with the two of them, and she had to tell Nicole Ari Parker, let him finish, even though he's going to be wrong. Let him finish what he's saying, then tell him he's wrong, but stop cutting him off all the time. And Nicole said she could not fuck the shuck up and let him finish a sentence. She said that. So now here we are 6 years later. She's complaining about not being a girlfriend anymore and actually being a wife. Yeah, a wife that wouldn't fuck the shuck up. I mean, she talks more than I do. And consequently, he's not doing those little romantic things anymore. I wouldn't either. I can't talk to her. Why am I going to sit up here and just walk up and give her kisses for no reason? And that's the whole thing. It's like, yeah, we can't read their minds and we're to blame for it. You leave, and if you find someone like that, everybody would understand when you leave her. They would all get it. And you know where I live right now, if a lady divorces, she's the one that has a low chance of remarrying, and the guy has a high chance of remarrying. That's the funny thing. And I told these guys, man, that's not fair. I mean, to assume that it's her fault is not fair. You weren't in that marriage. And they said, yeah, we know it's not a fair assumption, but everyone makes it. You know what? We need that assumption in the West. Now, here they don't need it, and they have it. Over there where you guys still are, where I left, you don't have it, but you need it. You need to go ahead and make that assumption. It doesn't mean you don't give a divorced woman a shot, especially if you're a divorced man. What I'm saying is let her prove that it wasn't her, because believe you me, if you are not even divorced, if you're just the fact that you're single, you got to prove to her that it's not your fault. You trying to impress her and you're actually available? Come on, she sit up looking to figure out what's wrong with you. And the older we get, the worse they get. They don't outgrow it as they get older. They get worse about it. It was off the charts in Atlanta back in 1995 and 96. I saw that myself. And some of the women in Atlanta told me that that was their mindset. If you're not already taken, then why not? Some of them even said the only safe bet is the married man, because the single guys all got something wrong with them. And they said this. There was one lady I knew, she wasn't married, but she was supposedly in a committed relationship with her baby daddy. And she straight told, not me, but she told someone else. This is back this was 2000 and 2001. And she straight said she had cheated on her baby daddy, stepped out. She knew he had not cheated on her. She also said that married men were always going to have an advantage because they were willing to make approaches. They were willing to make approaches because they had learned from being in Atlanta that being married was the way to go. How do I know? My brother, see, I'm gonna tell you about my own family one time. My father upgraded and got a new wedding ring. He gave the old wedding ring as a gift to my brother. My brother was not married at the time. He wore the wedding ring. And he said that he was treated completely different after that point, and it was better, not worse. Single and married women alike looked up to him, just more respect. It was like they didn't question why he was single because he wasn't single. They didn't question his worth anymore. That's what happened in my brother's case. When I got married, I was Muslim, and I didn't know that we're not supposed to wear wedding rings. I wasn't aware at that time. So I wore one for a while. Now, as y'all know, we Muslims do not believe in adultery. We don't believe in fornication, but adultery is even worse. And so I didn't even want women making passes at me once I got married like that, especially if they knew I was married. So I stopped wearing it. I quit wearing it so that I would not draw attention to myself, because having a wedding ring on in Atlanta in those days, and probably still is the case, began to draw them. And I was like, no, you waited too late. Get out my face. And I didn't appreciate that kind of attention. So much for the theory that it's not them, it's you, right? If that's the case, how come? And then many of you know someone that went through something similar. All of you know that you all know someone that's married and gets approached. And maybe you were younger, you thought, well, the women like him the same way his wife does. No. Ask him what happens when he was not married. And so now we understand what it is. Now we all know that they just prefer guys that are taken. They'd rather compete and they'd rather share, especially if he's loaded. They would rather share than to have someone to themselves. And they're coming out and saying this. They're not even mad when a successful man cheats. They're mad when a regular run-of-the-mill guy cheats. Hell, they're mad if a regular run-of-the-mill man just marries 2 wives, which is not cheating. They get upset about that. Let him be successful and he can just outright cheat. They're okay with it. The wife's okay and the girlfriends are okay with it. And it just goes to show you that they're for sale. So the thing is this, it is a war. And I'm not even going to tell you to fight it. I'm going to tell you to get your passports and the skill set, and I'm going to tell you to leave. In the meantime, you only fight it defensively on ways to protect yourself. And you fight that war by deceiving them howsoever you have to keep yourself safe. You fight them by defensively by not being alone with the ones you don't know that are honest and truthful. You fight them by flying under the radar. And you do this until you can get a skill set and a passport and go somewhere else to a place where it's better. And if you can't do it, then try to help some other young guy to do it earlier on in his life. Because believe you me, guys, it's much better to be out in the jungles in the Philippines, living in an adequate shelter, but you've got peace of mind with your spouse, than it is to be in a penthouse in New York. It's probably worth tens of millions, and you don't have peace of mind because she's insisting that y'all tie the knot one. And she's going to take half when she decides to bounce. It's a shame that it's got to be like that. But Danielle, you guys got to remember that Danielle George already said on live stream with BGS over 2 months ago. She said, Black women in the West are not going to change until Black men start leaving. And she didn't know that there was a growing number of Black men that were beginning to leave. And you can't leave them for that Western white woman, because that's the one that taught sisters everything they knew. Sisters was just brazen with it. That's all. They just came out in the open with a lot of the stuff. But the real sneaky and covert versions of what they do came from this aunt. You got to leave for a completely different cultural block. And be sure to offend these moms and these gynocrat goons and matriarchal mandingos by telling the young guys that you know what this is all about. Let them know this is a war. Straight tell them, yeah, you're young. You're interested in women. They know it, and they're trying to take advantage. And it's not even though they're interested in you, it's not a mutual thing in their mind. They're looking to take an advantage. They want the wedding and not the marriage. But they also want that alimony. They want the salary without the work too. They don't want to do any of the work. And then what they're doing is actually sitting up now and demanding that they will not do any work and that they're going to take the salary and all the benefits. And that nobody's good enough. And don't let these coaches and PUAs tell you any different either. Doesn't matter how alpha you get. She's going to complain one day, and she's going to complain about something she should not. And then somebody else who will do none of the things you have to do, nothing like what you've done, will reap the benefits when you're not looking. And Mr. Smith, I would say, yeah, they want to be gods, but in actuality, they don't want the responsibility of God. They just want the authority of God. They want you to actually be the God, but obedient to them. They don't even want to be God. They just want to be God's boss and tell him what to do. You're the one that has to actually be the God while they sit back and they're human. But then they want to tell you what to do. And God knows, the real God knows that if you obeyed them, they would lose interest even then. Like I said, Lois Lane is not willing to try to be Wonder Woman, but she's demanding Superman. And even if she got Superman, she would sit up and say, I wonder if I could do better. So, yeah, I've done this for an hour. Thank you guys for listening and being patient. Hit that share button. I was tired, so I wasn't really that lively and that loud. Plus, I didn't want to wake up my wife. But hit the share button anyway, because the message is more important. And y'all feel free to come on to the channel even under this one into the comment section. Y'all give me suggestions for the next live if you want to. I don't mind. I take suggestions for topics for the next ones. All right. Thanks for listening. Appreciate that. Assalamu alaikum to some of you. Peace out to the rest of you. Black heart, black mind, blackout. Assalamu alaikum, and black heterosexual male power just because they don't like it.